All right, good evening, everyone. Let's start this webinar. My name is Daria Kasyanenko. I'm a senior lecturer and an expert at the Faculty of Computer Science at HEC. And for several years, I've worked with journalists and media students to help them create data-driven stories. I also had an internship in the USA where we studied media literacy in Washington Post, New York Times, UMass, and Emerson College. And now I'm delighted to tell you today about data journalism. I could talk about it for ages. And basically, we all know how data-driven businesses these days are. They make profit from data and claim that data is the new oil. And the governments regulate data usage, but who watches the watchers? And here come journalists. Oftentimes, journalists are called watchdogs, and watchdog journalism is a form of investigative journalism where journalists, authors, or publishers fact-check and interview political and public figures. They do that in order to increase accountability in democratic governance systems, and data journalism is a huge part of it now. And today we'll talk about what is the essence of data journalism. I'll show you some powerful data stories. Then I'll break down the structure of a data journalism team. Spoiler, it takes a village to create a data-driven story. And also give you some links to one of the best data journalism teams there are. My presentation will take up to 1 hour, maybe 40-45 minutes, and I'll gladly answer any of your questions once we complete the presentation. Brent Brown, who is an American professor, once said, I thought, I'm a storyteller. I'm a qualitative researcher. I collect stories. That's what I do. Maybe stories are just data with a soul. And data journalists have adopted it as their anthem. Maybe stories are just data with a soul. First of all, let's clear the terms' meanings to be on one page. So data is a collection of facts, while information puts those facts into context. And while data is raw and unorganized, information is organized. Both data and journalism are troublesome terms, and some people think of data as any collection of numbers, most likely gathered as a Google spreadsheet. And 20 years ago, that was pretty much the only sort of data that journalists dealt with. But we live in a digital world now, a world in which almost anything can and perhaps anything is described with numbers. And what makes data journalism different from the rest of the journalists? Perhaps it is the new possibilities that open up when you combine the traditional nose for news and ability to tell a compelling story with the sheer scale and range of digital information now available. It all started with a map, really, and how often does a map change the world? In 1854, one produced by Dr. Jon Snow. I know it's not a Game of Thrones reference. He actually was named that, and he altered the world forever. So in the world of the 1850s, cholera was believed to spread by miasma in the air. Germs were not yet understood or studied, and the sudden and serious outbreak of cholera in London's Soho was basically a mystery. So Snow did something data journalists often do now. He mapped the cases. So the map essentially represented each death as a bar, and you can see it in this image. And it turned out later that the water for the pump was polluted by sewage from a nearby cesspit where a baby's diapers contaminated with cholera had been dumped. But he didn't just produce the map, it was one part of a detailed statistical analysis. And it was a story of life and death. I want to show you some of the most prominent data stories through the years. Some of them are my favorite. And the first one is Do No Harm by Las Vegas Times. They published it in 2010, which is quite early when there wasn't as much tools as we have now. So what they do, they analyzed more than 2.9 million hospital billing records, and it revealed more than 3,600 preventable injuries, infections, and surgical mistakes. They obtain data through a public records request, and we'll talk in a minute about all the laws that actually allow journalists to do that. And they identified patients that died because of mistakes that could have been prevented. And if you know, in the USA, there is a huge health crisis and healthcare crisis. So it was really one of the best journalistic pieces at that time. And so let me just, I will show it to you in a minute. So here it is. So there was a map with a timeline that shows infection spreading hospital by hospital, and also you can just sort data by preventable injuries or by hospital and so on and so forth. But what I want you to look at are actually source documents. So what they did, they had to split the story in 5 parts, and they had all these transcripts and records that they obtained. There were lawsuits. It was something that was inside documents at some hospitals. So we have these 5 parts of large documents that were actually, they went through it by hand. There weren't many tools used. It was basically an Excel spreadsheet, and also just people printing it out and just making these docs where they would put any significant information. And actually, it had a real impact. So the Nevada legislature responded with 6 pieces of legislation. The next one, I will show it to you through here. Sorry, no, don't go there. Okay, here. The next one is the government employee salary database, which was published by Texas Tribune. Texas Tribune actually is one of the best data story collectors now and producers. So what they did, they collected 660,000 government employee salaries into a database for users to search and generate stories from. It's for free. Anyone can come and look it up, and you can search by agency, name, or salary. It's very simple. Here you have some scrolling entertainment. So this is Jane, is one of 79 park rangers. They make around the same salary. And so they have this graph showing us, well, basically just a diagram of median salary for all 113 agencies. And you can see here all the agencies. It's updated on January 1st, 2024. You have total employees, median salary, minimum, maximum. And for example, let's say we want to look up one of the best salaries there is, and it's public accounts and judiciary sections. So what you have here, you have, well, the criminal district attorney is the highest paid position with a median salary of $168,000. That's actually a lot. So here they have the median salary, and here they have who has 5 employees from criminal district attorney have median salary of $168,000. Employees by gender, employees by race, length of employment. So basically many of them work for up to 10 years. They work full-time, which is maybe expected. And here we have current positions. So you can come to criminal district attorney page and you can actually see the employees. So let's just load up. Yeah, so we have these employees, which you can check out. So Jakey Claiborne II, full-time, hours per week 40, hire date January 12th, 2022. And here you can see the date, the job title, the agency, weekly hours, salary, and change, how much it changes from year to year. It's actually legal to post this kind of information because, as I said, journalists are watchdog. They have to watch where all the taxes go. The next one is a full text visualization of the Iraq war logs made in 2012. And as the authors say that they wanted to go a step further and design a visualization based on the richest part of each report, so the free text summary. And let me show you. It might look a little bit clumsy for our liking right now, but let's keep in mind that it was actually produced in 2012. So here they have it, and it's basically a natural language processing made in 2012. So what they did, they had all these clusters where the words were collided, and they had to analyze it not by keyword search, which was the most popular way of working with text there, but they actually did the TF-IDF and back of words. Here I will show up. Yeah, so they used the back of words model, TF-IDF, cosine similarity, and so on, to compare documents. So right now we say that's like, well, that's basic, everyone can do that. But in 2012, it was really a breakthrough, and they had about 450-something thousand words. So they really did a good job. And after that, this work described there, it actually blossomed into the overview project, and now it's it's here. Now it's an open source large document, which gives you a hint on what visualization tools for investigative journalists you should use. The next one, let me just see. The next one is quite actually funny to me. I mean, it's quite serious, but at the same time, it's quite funny. So what happened here, BuzzFeed News has assembled an unprecedented picture, as they say, from data collected by the flight tracking website Flightradar24, and they tracked it from mid-August to the end of December of 2015. They identified about 200 federal aircraft by FBI and domestic Homeland Security. And they discovered, which was not what people actually knew before them, they discovered that day after day, dozens of the planes circled above cities across the country. Here you can see all these maps, and the red one are FBI, and the blue ones are DHS, Domestic Homeland Security. And here they identified their targets. Basically, it was mostly mosque or Islamic squares, where you could just, or something happened in these neighborhoods. And so it was actually, you might think, well, that's their job, like that's what they do. Why is it an issue? That's okay. Why was it groundbreaking? But basically it's about surveillance and privacy. And they think, the journalists, that you should have knowledge about that. You should know when someone is surveilling you. They also have these cool pictures of what is going on inside the board, so what's here. So they have cameras, they have augmented reality screen, cell phone tracking, and so on and so forth. So and there are regulations that they did not comply with. So it was a very prominent piece. The next one is one of the recents. It's Berliner Morgenpost. They published it in 2022, so 2 years ago now. And well, with the impact of climate change weighing really heavy on our minds, these media published Uninhabitable. They first published it in German, but then they also translated it in English. And this piece was born from the collaboration between data journalists. Let me just take their names. Yeah, that was Ida Flick, Andre Potsold, and Benji Zer. And it basically a huge guided scrollytelling interactive, full of context and the most important information, which is accompanied by this interactive globe, and it allows the readers to jump across the planet and see the different effects and severity region by region. So we have here water stress. They also used IPCC, which is one of the global organization who watching the environment and have all this data. So they used this data and they made some predictions with machine learning. They also said that they visualized scenarios that would lead up to global warming between 2.5 degrees and 3 degrees. Now we are crawling up to 2 degrees warming per year. So here you have all this data. You can explore the globe. So here you can see all factors. You can look at heat or water stress or sea level rise or tropical cyclones. Here it's not really happening in Russia. Yeah, so that's what they did. And they have these huge details about sources and methodology, and can really these models predict the future, and so on and so forth. So that's what they did. They also have a lot of other really cool projects, but this one was very recent. And another one is called Corridor Furtivo, as I believe it's pronounced. It's Secret Corridors. It is a stunning, really, crime investigation, and they used satellite imagery, artificial intelligence, databases, and on-the-ground reporting to create the most complete map of crime in the Venezuelan jungle. So the first step of this project was to develop an algorithm together with experts, of course, that served to identify and link images similar to how we can have an overhead shots of open pit mines and also secret airstrips, so that it would allow to find patterns in vast jungle. Then this data was cross-checked by Planet.com, Google Earth, and Digital Globe before the results from this database were finally transferred to Mapbox base map. So here you can see it. They also have some legend here. It's in Spanish, of course. So later on, this actual algorithm, it's open source now. It served as the beginning of Amazon Mining Watch. It was a project that launched Pulitzer Center, and they use this methodology to study the Amazon as a whole now. And also, the authors were asked if it really had any implications after they published that. So here you have it, 2015, 2020. And actually, they said that Bolivarian National Armed Forces announced that they destroy illegal mining tracks in the Amazons. So it actually was a very, very helpful piece. Then let me come to my presentation here. Then, as you've seen from this example, all the stories come from mainly open data. So it's data provided by the government, first and foremost, and businesses. There are also some other types of data we can get from researchers, for example, but mainly it's from the government and businesses because journalists act as watchdogs. So let's talk about ethics and legal responsibility. As you may be pinpointed in some of the projects I showed you, we might really think, is it really ethical to post all the employees, government employees, with their money, how much they earn with their salary? And for example, in Sweden, they have this project Lexbase, which is an open data project where you can, if you have your social security number, you can check anyone in Sweden, and you can actually see their salary, their criminal records, and basically where they live, and everything, only by social security numbers. And journalists always go there to have some dirt to dig up. So the concept of open data is that the data can be freely used, reused, and redistributed by anyone, literally anyone. So the main characteristics of open data are free access. It should be machine readable. Usually it's an XML or JSON files, meaning API connections, but also it could be just a CSV or an XLSX files. They are also machine readable. And it should be license free. That's the characteristics of open data. And many governments actually have it mandatory to post open data. In Russia, we also had the open data portal. It worked from 2012 until 2021. And now it's not really working. Someone still upload their data, and they always discuss how it should be very good if we started to post their open data from many state bodies, but it doesn't really work. Another point of open data, of course, there are restrictions. If you are, as a journalist, take some, let's say, a spreadsheet, and it's an open data. It has no license. I mean, it has a license which is granted you free use. It's machine readable, it's free access, it's on some open portal. But then if you look inside and you can see that there is personal information, you will be held accountable if you post it. So it's actually your responsibility to check if the open data has any personal data, any state secret or copyright. Just because it's published online doesn't mean that you can just use it with no restrictions whatsoever. What are typical open data sets produced by governments? Here you can see open data inventory. I will show it to you in a minute. But basically, all governments, they have these registers of organization, business, departments. They have geospatial data. They have health and education data, social mobility provision, and so on and so forth. And let me just show you the open data inventory. They track how open and transparent different countries are, and you actually will be surprised, or maybe not, that Russia is one of the most open countries in terms of open data. So they have it until 2022. They gather it from official resources, and here you have Russia. If you click on it, they will have a pop-up. The score is 62 out of 100, and we are on the place 57. And if you click on Russian Federation, you will have this country profile. Let's just make it generate its magic. Yeah, so here we have it, and you have the summary, the coverage, and so on and so forth. But also it has these data categories, for example, like food security and nutrition, gender statistics, crime and justice, and poverty and income. And if you come in here, you have dataset coverage, disaggregation none, years when it was checked, levels, if it has metadata, which is mandatory if you post an open data data set as a government, you should have a metadata. Data format doc, bulk download, term of use not available, navigation, so on. And here we have a link to Grosstat. It actually just downloads the file. And here we have also poverty rate. It's from FedStat. So you can basically just look at any country you want. Oh my God, it's moving out of my control. Right, so we have, for example, China. And if you look at it, they also have some statistics lined up. So they have a 37 score. Let's just also generate profile. So they have 149th rank, and here you like government finance, you can see it's 100. So actual revenues, expenditures, and here are the sources. Right, so let me go back to my presentation. And if you're curious, I'm sure that we will send you the presentation. You can go through all the links. I also want to talk to you about Russian laws, because there are some big misconceptions about what can journalists do, what kind of information they can obtain. And just bear with me, it will be a brief 2 slides, but what we have in laws. So state bodies and local self-government bodies, they are obliged to provide access to information about their activities, their expenditures, their budgets, their revenues, their staff, how many people are there, their salaries, that they are obliged to provide access. And actually any person can go to any of this body and access this information without justifying why do you need it. You just come and go, hey, I need this information, and they should give it to you. That's in the law. And there are deadlines to respond to an appeal. You actually have to mail it through post offices, but for the media, they can email it. So if you have an appeal from citizens, you have to respond in 30 days from the date of registration, not from the date you sent it, but from the date they received it. And if it's an appeal from the media, then it's only 7 days to answer. What we cannot restrict access to. They cannot restrict access to all the legal acts that affect the rights, the freedoms, and the duties of man and citizen. We have this portal prava.gov.ru. You can access any legal information there. Also, information on the state of the environment. This is where we also track the climate change in Russia. And it was possible by March 2021 amendments. Before that, it was actually a classified information. You didn't really have access to it. Then information on budget funds, except for information constituting a state or official secret, of course. And also information that is accumulated in libraries, museums, archives, and so on. And this information, according to the law, is provided free of charge. But there is sensitive information. Well, there is a vast body of information, the disclosure of which may carry risks for the entity to which it relates, but also to the people who would possibly suffer from disclosing this information. And although the concept of sensitive data or sensitive information is not generally defined in Russian legislation, there are a number of specific areas that have received their own normative regulation. So, for example, there is personal data of individuals. And when you, for example, signed up as our prospective students, you also click on this little box that you agree to send your personal information, and we say that we will never disclose it to third parties. So It's also information on production processes for the commercial sector, patents lay here, and information protection regime and circulation of restricted information, which are also obtained through federal laws. But if we look at European example, they have GDPR. I'm sure many of you heard about it. It was quite a ruckus when it first was proposed. And it's extraterritorial, which was new for the legislation on the protection of personal data. So basically, it doesn't really matter where the company is registered. If you provide services for people in European Union, you have to follow these guidelines. You have to oblige to this regulation. And actually, many countries try to pass such bills, but it's quite hard to regulate it. And of course, there are ethical issues. Like sometimes you get an excellent CSV of a data set. You look at it and you can see the story building up. But you can see that there is actually no metadata, and it was actually sent to you by some official. And you must ask yourself, so what is the vested interest of the person giving me this data? And how has this information been collected? What might be missing from it? Are there any mistakes? But also, how was the question phrased? For example, if you get some statistics from all these questionnaires, what were the questions? How were they phrased? Can you actually look up the methodology, how it was conducted? And then you should ask, can I find a second independent source? So there is a rule of thumb in journalism where you should have 3 independent sources before you can publish information. But as you can see and as you can understand, it doesn't really happen that much that you can really have 3 independent sources. So you try to have at least one more independent source. And the main question is, what is the margin of error? What if it's false? What if it has errors? What if someone who gave it to you want to have some dirty gain? And it's a very big ethical issues, especially when there is so much bigger data. You have so many places where you could get data. It's really a headache. And what are the key skills needed for data journalists? Here is the pudding's process to go from idea to data story. And the pudding is one of the leaders in this industry. They produce only data stories, and they come up with this continue, pivot, or put it down piece, where they also had this very great diagram flowchart. And well, they want to see how you can make conscious decisions of when to continue in one direction, when to pivot, and when to leave the idea for good. So it's actually quite a big flowchart, and they put a lot of thought into it. I want to just briefly go through it with you. So the first question you ask, do you have a unique question? Is it really unique? Is it really interesting? So you might have, yes, it's a unique question. It might be not unique, but it adds to the conversation we have right now. Or if it's not a unique question, you just don't do it. You just put it down. But then if it is a unique question, can it be answered with data? And if it cannot, you should come up with a new question. It's not a data story if you don't have data to prove it. If you have the data, does it exist? If it doesn't, can you collect it? But if it does, is it ethical to collect or use this data? Then, if it's not maybe ethical, even if you have an ounce of doubt, you don't put a story. You just put it down. You do not write it. But if it's definitely 100%, 150%, you can ethically collect or use this data, you see it and you try to understand, are the results of the analysis interesting? If you're not sure, maybe ask someone else. If you're sure it's not interesting, you either come up with another question or you just don't write it at all. So if it's actually interesting, you should ask yourself, are you the right person to tell the story? And if you're not the right person, maybe you can collaborate with someone who is. If you cannot collaborate with someone who is the right person, then you put it down again. But if you are the right person, or you can bring expert to you, then you create a plan for your data story. Is it still interesting after the analysis and after you have a plan? If it's not, maybe you put it down. If it's interesting, then you make the thing, you write it, you make all the analysis, and you also ask yourself, is it still interesting? So if it's not interesting, as you can guess, you just put it down. And only if you've gone through all these steps and you've assessed all the question and you answered it honestly, because sometimes you just wrap up your head in the story, you cannot just leave it. But that's where the editors come through and say, no, you put it down. And that's how a data story is made. But what are the team and skills needed for that? This is an example of how the data journalism team operates in La Nación, which is an Argentinian-based media studio. And it's actually quite common for the team to have these 6 positions. So first of all, you have a journalist coordinator, basically a manager who can do database management, who can code in Python, who knows what Git is, and who also knows what storytelling is. I'm not really sure which one of these skills is the hardest. Perhaps it's storytelling, because you can learn the SQL and Python and Git. But if you cannot combine all these pieces of story into something really interesting, then maybe that's not the role for you. And then there is the reporter. So reporter should be an expert in the laws around access to information. Basically, a reporter is someone who goes and digs through the tons of information and says, okay, this spreadsheet we can have, this data set is okay, we can parse on this social media because we oblige with the rules, and so on and so forth. So the reporter is the one who gets the raw data. Then we have data analyst. So the data analyst should know Python, OpenRefine. OpenRefine is a no-code tool for cleaning your data and organizing it. Then Tableau, of course, which is just visualization. D3, which helps you with the 3D models. And Neo4j, which is a graph dashboard visualizations. Then you also have designers, because always you cannot use all the built-in arguments, and you need to have this unique perspective on design as well. So you need a designer. And also you need to have a backend and a front-end developer. They have basic skills to obtain. So it's Java, Ruby, Python, SQL, MongoDB, and front-end developer should have HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Because often the data stories are much complex than the regular stories, like the regular news. So you really need a back-end developer and a front-end developer. Also, everyone talks right now about generative AI and how we will no longer need journalists, and we really will just have all this Gen AI content to consume. But actually today, as never before, the work of journalists is important. Well, you see, and I'm sure you've heard it a lot and you know it from practice, that Gen AI tools, they are exciting, but currently unreliable. So they hallucinate, as you know, and you cannot really trust them in terms of information, not data, but information. So some say that there is no room for unreliability in journalism, media marketing, creative, and even engineering work in terms of media. And another take is that media has always been at the forefront of technology use. So, for example, Associated Press, since 2014, they automated text stories from structured sets of data, like trading info, soccer games, baseball games, and so on. And they use natural language generation, which is now a part of natural language processing. And they've done it since 2014. They had all these automated stories back then. Then there is The Guardian. They focus on situations where AI can only improve the quality of work. For example, if it helps to interrogate large data sets, so be it. But they cannot publish fully AI-generated stories. Then there is Wired. Wired is actually one of the best tech news in the USA. And of course, they experimented with AI. They use it as a research or analytical tool, but they do not publish AI-generated stories or even texts edited by AI. Many newsrooms now, they post text edited by AI with the subtext that we used the AI, but they said, no, we only write human texts, and that's why our audience come to us, not for just some summary from Gen AI. And this one is maybe just for laugh, but New York Times this December 2023, they filed a lawsuit against OpenAI and Microsoft, and they claimed that OpenAI used New York Times articles to train their GPT-3. And they say that it's damaged them for billions of dollars. And New York Times are one of the most reputable media in the world. And we will see how it continues and what will be with the lawsuit. Now it's just on the first stage, of course. And just to conclude my presentation, I would like to show you some resources and data journalism teams to follow. Let me just have this presentation ready. Right. So, of course, first of all, it's the New York Times. They have all this visual journalism, and they also have data journalism. So let's just look at one of the graphs they have. So 400,000 children. I believe they used the US Department of Health and Human Services data, which is also an open data that they are obliged to post. So here they have all these stories that they come up from a big data set. The next one is just 1 minute. The next one is ProPublica. They are one of the pioneers in data journalism. Like, everyone looks up to them. And it doesn't quite load to me, but that's okay. Let's just have, well, you can see that there is the most detailed map of cancer-causing industrial air pollution in the US, which is what makes them using the data to protect people's health and watch the watchers. Then there is the Pudding, which is state-of-the-art, I would say, media company. And they make digital publications. They call them visual essays. And they have all these great things. So, for example, let's say, what does a happily ever after look like? And you have this scrolling interface. You have the covers, and they say what percentage of romance novel covers featuring. And at the bottom of this page, let me just go through it. They have this Google Sheet, where they gathered all this information. So here they have year, season, publisher, date, and so on. They also have this picture, style, and so on and so forth. So they have all these data collected, and I'm not sure I can really scroll through this. Listing with no covers they have. And also they have a GitHub. Let me pull it up. They have the GitHub where they post many data sets that they gathered. So they do not really use the existing data. They use it just as addition, but all their data is usually parsed or scraped or got through the APIs. They have MIT license, which is a free use license, and you can it's open to the public, so you can use it here. And well, just let's say cookies. What is cookies? So here you have chocolate chip cookie ingredients. So, and here we have just some kind of information and a CSV. So here we have CSV. You can use it. You can make stories out of it. So they're really cool and they're really great. We have La Nación in Argentina, which I have shown you the secret corridors thing. Also, we have 538. They used to be an independent news media, but now they are part of ABC News. And actually, if you look through the arguments in Seaborn functions, you can see that one of the graphic details you can set is actually called 538, and they named it after this news organization. So if you set your Seaborn diagrams to use 538 style, then you will have something like this. So it's a tribute to them. In Russia, we have the Systemный блок, which is basically a digital humanities works. You can see here just some infographics, autoencoder, and so on. They have blocks and have all these models and how you can use it for exploring texts and everything else. We also have Tinkoff Journal, which is actually one maybe of the best data stories published in Russia. So they also are a key player in the field. Yeah. So here I've gathered it on one slide so you can see it and click on it. And that's basically it. That's all I wanted to tell you. And I will be glad to answer any of your questions if you have them. What analysis program would you recommend to a beginner who needs to learn how to analyze data in a week? So if we say it's big data, first of all, I would say Google Spreadsheet, because it's a very powerful tool. You also can modify it with OpenAI features, with ChatGPT features. So that would be good. But also I would say just pandas in Python. It's not really that hard to learn it if you have great guidelines. So I would say it's Google Spreadsheets and pandas library in Python. What do you think about Data Lens by Yandex, and will you send link to presentation after the end of the webinar? Yes, I will ask Margarita to send it to you, so you will definitely have all the slides I showed you. What do I think about Data Lens by Yandex? Well, we used to have BI tool, but now it's left us. So I know my colleagues use Data Lens. I personally have never used it, but I've seen some cool features there. So I believe it's usable at least. not really looked into it, so can't really comment on that. Do you have any other questions to me? All right, I don't see any more questions. No, I see one. No, yeah, everything was pretty clear. Yeah, thank you. I guess my background in media does show up. Okay, so I was really glad to be here and to talk to you about one of my most wonderful, interesting, I believe, things in the universe, which is data journalism. Oh, yeah, I see the questions. Yeah, sure. Between definition of investigators and Western examples in part number 1, already both science and medicine, except last case, may you clarify, please? Seems more, which is about mythical openness of Earth bodies, with no example on Russian investigations. I wonder how brilliant Russian investigators had used OpenGov data for their articles. Considering the second question, actually, if you look through Systemny blog or through Tinkoff journal, you can actually see all the data they use, mostly from open data. And also we have a lot of TASS, RIA Novosti, media sources, they also use it. I understand the subcontext of this, and I cannot really comment on that, because there are some independent journalists that work, for example, in Telegram channels, and they use the data published here. We work with our students. We also make all these little investigations about this, using this kind of data. And also between the definition of investigators and Western examples. Well, you see, they have a very unique perspective on taxes and where do they go. It's also a case, for example, for Australia. And I don't really see the dichotomy of that, because, well, yeah, they look after the government, they look after the environment, because, for example, the story of Uninhabitable, it's also about the government doing that. And in Germany, there is a huge crisis on what people want to have and how their carbon footprint really is. So they all are investigative, and they all are about watching the watchers. Yeah. All right. My question on absence of Russian examples in your lecture. Well, as you see, there are, well, as I've said, just the Systemny blog, we don't really have that much groundbreaking examples in Russia, also because we don't really use all the tools there is. And I've showed you the world acclaimed examples, which are usually made in USA, and in Europe, and also in Argentina. Surprisingly, they have a really good data stories made there. So I would just suggest you go through Systemny blog and Tinkoff journal. They really have good investigative also pieces. For example, Tinkoff journal made an investigative piece about cancer and all the pollution that we have in Moscow and how it affects it. So it was one of the best examples, perhaps, in Russia. All right, so we will send you these slides and the record of this presentation, and I wish you good evening, and it was nice to meet you. Hopefully we'll meet again, maybe discussing some other things. Okay, and goodbye.